Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today I am going to discuss the first 7 stories, the first week out of my project 30 Stories in 30 Days, where I read a different short story every day in September and invite you to read along. So, if you are new, I have been posting a story every day. I posted the first week in advance, and then each day in the community post, I post the story of the day, and then once a week I kind of do a little roundup, talk a little bit about each story, and pick out a story of the week. That part's new, picking out a story of the week. But we're going to talk briefly about each story. It's going to be spoiler free as best I can in case you have not yet read the stories. So I'm just a brief little discussion of each story and then a selection of the story of the week. Now, you might think that it is a done deal because I have mentioned numerous times that my favorite short story of all time is Good Country People by Flannery O'Connor. And every year, this is the 3rd year, that is the story of day 1. She gets to lead the parade. She is the grand marshal, the winner of the pageant. But I'm disqualifying her from winning story of the week because she's story of the year, the century, and of my whole life. So she's already won. We're going to look at the other ones to choose a story of the week. Maybe you can guess from my comments which one I'm going to choose. All right, so we are beginning with Flannery O'Connor, Good Country People. I read the story out of this collected volume. This is my copy. The story's not in this particular book because it was from the collection A Good Man is Hard to Find. I used to have an old battered copy of that, but when we got this collected works, we donated some odds and ends, but I kept this, Everything That Rises Must Converge, because this was my very first Flannery O'Connor book. It was required in this class that I took that was short fiction, and I had not heard of her, had not read her. It was when I was an English major in undergraduate, and I got this book secondhand at the bookstore, the college bookstore, and it has notes. It has notes and underlines and highlights, both from me and some former person, because it was used then in the 80s. And so there's just too much history for me to ever get rid of this particular copy. Then fast forward, I'm in graduate school, I'm at a party, and I meet this cute guy who is, I'm working on my MA in English, and he's working on his MFA in painting and printmaking, and we meet in a conversation about, guess who? Flannery O'Connor. So that is how I met Stephen, talking about Flannery O'Connor, how nerdy can it get, and then we danced to Groove is in the Heart. That brings us up to Good Country People. It was written in 1955, and in this story, of which I will not tell you too much, we have a young woman. She's about 30 years old. Her name is Holga, but her given name was Joy. She changed her name to Holga, much to her mother's consternation. And Joy, or Holga, has a PhD in philosophy, but she is living at home with her mother. She has a prosthetic leg and a heart condition that is considered to be terminal. And so she has had to come back home, and she is fiercely intelligent and desperately bitter and cynical. And the rest of the cast of characters is her mother, given to spouting positive platitudes, like it takes all kinds to make the world go round. And we also have her wife of her hired hand, Mrs. Freeman, who doesn't really do any work but hangs around and gossips all day. And then into this little scenario comes a young Bible salesman. It is the encounter between Holga and the Bible salesman, who goes by the name of Manly Pointer, that I really can't tell you anything about without spoiling the story. And I can't even tell you my favorite scene from this story because it's almost at the end. I just can't tell you a whole lot. But it is a story that is darkly comic, as much of her work is. There are parts of the story that I still don't completely, I mean, I understand it plot-wise, but thematic wise, there's still things that I turn over in my mind and try to think about what O'Connor wanted me to take away. So I'm still working on it. That's the hallmark of a great story or any great piece of literature. If you can read it over and over again throughout your life and you always love it, but you're never finished with it. And that is this story. And I think I do see some biographical threads in here. I can't overlook the fact that we have this very educated woman who is relegated to living out in the country at her mother's home with physical infirmities and mobility problems and a terminal condition, much as Flannery O'Connor herself did, who suffered from very severe lupus that ended her life short and caused a lot of pain and mobility issues. And she also had to go home and live with her mother, and I can just imagine some of the tension in that relationship. So I love this story. If you have not read it, I wish everybody would at least read it once and see how they feel about it, because it just has an immovable place in my heart. All right, so moving along, the next story was The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. A very, very short, disturbing, creepy little story that was written in 1843. Did I mention that Good Country People was written in 1955? I can't remember if I did. 1843 for The Telltale Heart. And something that kind of cracked me up when I was rereading it, not the story itself because it's not funny, but thinking about the fact that this is the first story a lot of people read by Edgar Allan Poe, and it comes up in a lot of anthologies for younger readers as a tale of terror. And I think I probably read it in middle school was the first time, and I'm reading it again and thinking, wow, this is pretty intense. It's very short, but it's super dark, grisly, violent, unhinged little story. And I can tell you it's only a few pages long, but it's grisly and it's bizarre, and it's a teeny little thrill ride. The next story was Bad Neighbors by Edward P. Jones from 2006. And this story, oh, by the way, I'm going to zigzag around. So I read The Telltale Heart out of my anthology, American Short Stories, that I have used time and again because it has so many jewels in it. I probably have The Telltale Heart in some other anthologies too. So it's hard to get away from Poe in any kind of American anthology. Well, I wasn't trying to get away. I was trying to find it. So, okay, moving on. So then the next one was Edward P. Jones. I read his novel, The Known World. I infamously got a copy of that book so that I could reread it. I liked it so much that I want to read it again and have my own copy, and I still haven't done it. It's on the maybe list for Remember December, but that maybe list has ballooned. There's probably 25 books on that. I kept jotting down, like, I'll make a list of things, and then I'll see what I'm going to read for Remember December. And it just keeps blossoming. And I don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, so the story is called Bad Neighbors. It was written in 2006, or published in 2006 in a story collection, which I went to the library and got because I paywalled myself out of the online copy. And so I tracked it down and found out that it was part of this collection called All Aunt Hagar's Children that came out in 2006. And it is a story about a neighborhood that is undergoing a gentrification, or it's somewhere caught between phases of a gentrification. It's a neighborhood that was once a white neighborhood. Then there was a white flight. It became a black neighborhood. And it is a neighborhood of upper middle class, educated black families, doctors, lawyers. And when a certain family moves into a house across the street that's being offered up for rent, the neighborhood in general disapproves of this family. So this family moves in, this big family of a dozen people moving into a 3-bedroom house. Their name is the Benningtons. And first they commit the crime of moving in on a Sunday, which is tacky, and they're there's just multiple cars and people, and the neighbors are just watching this and trying to figure out who the parts of this family are. And the story kind of takes off where a girl named Sharon from the nice side of the street befriends a boy named Neil from this kind of ramshackle family, or that's how they're perceived anyway. And they discovered that they have a love of literature in common, and she befriends him. They begin walking to and from school together, exchanging books. It is a strictly platonic friendship, but it attracts the attention, negative attention, from both her family, other people, her parents' friends, and also from the boy's family as well, who distrusts this friendship. And the person to really focus on in this story is not Neil Bennington, but Derek, his older brother. And if you read the story all the way to the end, you find yourself wishing that you had paid closer attention to Derek from the very beginning. That's all I'm going to say about that. It's the kind of story that you get to the end and you go, oh wait, I want to read this through again. There's a time jump in the middle of it from this time when Sharon and Neil are in high school up until a few years later. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the situation in Harlem Shuffle. If you read that book by Colson Whitehead, the main character of that story is a man who has his family background is troubled. His father was a known local criminal. And even though he runs a furniture store and has kind of a legitimate facade, he kind of dabbles in some things. His father-in-law is a lawyer and thinks that his daughter did not marry well enough. She did marry somebody from that wrong side of the street, and he's constantly being there's a lot of microaggressions that go on in the family dynamics. But it's really good, and I would like to read further if I hadn't just buried myself in such a reading avalanche this month. And I'll either turn it back in and put it on my list, or maybe keep it around and try to read one or two other stories before I relinquish it. But I really enjoyed that one. The next one was an audio story, which is a different kind of format for me that I'm not the greatest with. But for a short story, that length of time, like a short story or an essay piece, I can kind of hang. So this was Hearing Aids by Roddy Doyle, Irish author. This was a recent story from 2023 on BBC Radio, and I liked it. I'm not going to say I loved it. It wasn't my favorite thing I ever heard or read by Roddy Doyle, because it kind of had, I don't know, maybe a little bit too, it was a little too wrapped up or something. But it's a story about a man who has just recently acquired hearing aids, and he's in a car with his wife. They've been married for a long time, and he's trying to get used to the hearing aids and the fact that they tune into the navigator, so the hearing aids are giving him driving directions, but she's saying something too. And in the course of this ride and this conversation, he starts to think about the way that he talks to his wife and her responses. And as the day goes on and he thinks about it, it starts to bother him more and more as he kind of comes to an awareness of his demeanor. I like the territory it was exploring, but I guess I just kind of wanted more. The next one was a story by Sarah Gailey. I read their book, Upright Women Wanted, earlier this year. I really liked it. And I would like to read another novel. And something that I like about this author is it's very hard to explain the category or genre of their fiction. And this story is definitely an example of this. And I have to say, this was my second choice. There was a story I wanted to put in that sounded so good because it was described as being about Victorian robots, Victorian era robots. But I couldn't find an accessible link, so I put this one in instead. That's called The Daily Commute. And it's sort of, I guess you'd call it speculative fiction. For a while there, I thought it was going to be horror, but then maybe not. But these people are on a bus, and as we gradually read, we realize that the bus is powered by bees, and that there's, rather than a bus driver, there's a, what do you call it? I forgot, like an apiarist, or the person who handles bees, is in charge, and the bus stops. We move around to different people that are sitting on the bus and kind of find out what their conflicts are. But the bus has to stop because the bees want to take a break. And you can't apparently hustle the bees. And one person begins to have just an enormous meltdown. So I won't tell you anymore. But then at that point it gets super weird. And I didn't know. That's when I thought, wait a minute, is it horror? But then it kind of takes another turn again and goes a different way. So this author is constantly surprising, and I would love, if you have read other novels by Sarah Gailey, if you want to give me any recommendation, because I would like to read more, but when I look them up, I cannot tell which one I would actually like. They're all so strange. I just don't know. The next one is definitely science fiction, and in fact won Hugo Award for short fiction this year. And it is, wait, what's the title of it? Better Living Through Algorithms by Naomi Kritzer. Had not previously read anything by this author, but I did get some recommendations in the community post about other things that she has written. And so this is about an app. It's about a startling app that is developed. First, a group of friends are talking about, one friend has gotten really into this app that guides, it's supposed to be a wellness app that gives you all these recommendations every day. And the other friends are kind of a little bit nervous and a little bit amused about what is going on with this app. And one of them is a journalist and wants to investigate it further. Because the app might tell you, it doesn't just tell you advice about fitness and what to eat, but really specific advice. And what you should do with your free time, and what, just your all kinds of things that are, it seems very invasive the way it knows what's going on and has all these suggestions for your day. It seems like it knows everything about you. And then it progresses to where instead of receiving the text on the app, people are calling you on the phone and telling you things. So is it actually beneficial, or is it a cult, or what the heck is it? And then workplaces start trying to require people to use the app. So in order to find out where this is all going, so I'm reading it and thinking, ooh, I mean, how is this going to go in some sort of really dangerous direction, or what are we going for here? But I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to read it for yourself. I'm not sure I love the ending, or maybe I do. The ending, I can't decide. It's not the way I thought it was going to turn out. But I can see why somebody would really, really love this ending. And I'm not sure that I did. But the fact that I was intrigued enough to sit and think about it means that I would like to read something else by this author. The last one in the batch was Hands by Sherwood Anderson. This one, we're going back in history. Let's see, it was 1919. And it's part of a collection called Winesburg, Ohio. And they are linked stories. And I thought that I had the book, and I thought that I had read the book. And now I don't think that I did. I do have some odds and ends from that book in anthologies, and I read this anthology to get the story Hands. But it is linked stories. And this particular one, Hands, it's a very short story that is about a man named Wing Biddlebaum. That's a nickname that has been given to him in the town that he lives in because of his hands, his expressive use of his hands, and the times where he seems like he's trying to control his hands. His hands just seem to be, and his hands also perform magic in his job as a fruit collector. It's kind of a seasonal worker, but he's lived in this town for 20 years and nobody really knows anything about him. There's a young man named George who is a budding journalist who befriends Wing, and in their conversations, Wing is able to relax and his hands come into play and he becomes more expressive and begins to talk with George. And then something happens that leads to us finding out more about Wing. That's what I'm going to tell you. But it is absolutely a beautiful story. The writing from the first sentence is so compelling, and there's just something mysterious. There's something exquisitely sad in this story. I know that George appears in other stories in Winesburg, Ohio, and I'm not sure about Wing, but this is the story that I went back and read the story again yesterday before I made this video, and I'm kind of giving something away here, right? Also, after I read the story, I thought, why do I not have a copy of Winesburg, Ohio? Because I need to read this in the order that Sherwood Anderson laid out as a piece. And I think I've kind of killed all the mystery here, that Hands is the story of the week. I like some more than others, but Hands wins it hands down. It's the story of the week. I was just kind of in awe of how entranced I got and attached to this person, Wing, with so little substance and had so many unanswered questions. And oh, the writing, oh my gosh. I did find out something terrible about Sherwood Anderson, the way he died. He has a really strange, go look him up. The twists and turns of his life were very strange. But in 1941, he was on this tour in Panama because he wanted to write. He got really interested in his last several years about labor conditions of working people in factories and mills and mines, and he was writing about that. And he went on a tour to Panama to look at the working conditions there. And somewhere along this trip, he swallowed a toothpick and he got peritonitis and died. And I thought, that sounds so excruciating, like such a horrible, horrible way to go. This was a collection of reads and rereads of mostly authors I had read before. I think only, if I look at my list, Naomi Kritzer is the only one that I'd never read anything else by, and I would like to read something else. But Winesburg, Ohio, like when I got to the end of Hands once or twice, I thought, well, I am officially now on the lookout for a copy of this book. I need the whole book. I need to read the whole thing. So that is the story of the week. If you read all of these, do you have a story of the week? If you only read a couple of them, which one was your favorite one? Maybe you didn't read any of these. What'd you read this week? What was the best thing? Let me know. We're going to continue on. I think, what are we reading today? I'm on a different week because I'm thinking about last week, and I think it's the Philip K. Dick story. So go read that, and we'll be talking about that in a few days. Have a great week coming up, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.